Orders, Commander.
How many times must I tell you? Mind the nerdish cap!
We are...
Well, hello everybody, and welcome again to Mind the Nerdish Gap. My name is Jay. This is my son Dante. It's probably be a little bit shorter one, a little bit under the weather going on over here, but and then after some of the challenges from our last episode, we'll try to keep it reasonable. So, so at any rate, Dante, you get to kick us off.
All right. So today I wanted to start off today's episode by asking you, what would you say is probably your favorite rendition of an evil Superman, right? So, like we've seen recently with The Boys and Homelander, or like you had mentioned that you had just gotten through season 1 of Invincible, so
Right.
Omni-Man, or even like General Zod, or like somebody like that we could throw in there as well as something to think about.
So I'm probably going to go a little bit of a deep cut on this one, but my actual favorite rendition of an evil Superman was an evil Superman. So Superman Red Sun, which I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I've heard of Red Sun, but I haven't like seen anything like in relation to it.
So what it is the whole premise is it's an Elseworld story, and the whole premise is instead of landing in Kansas, Superman lands in the Ukraine. Right, and so then he gets raised to be a communist, and he ends up creating what he considers to be a utopian world. But part of the way he makes his utopian world is anybody that's a dissident, he makes them into a robot. He basically gets them lobotomized. They become Superman robots.
Oh, okay.
Right, but he's still kind-hearted and he's trying to do the best for everybody. But think about that. So to me, first of all, I love villains that feel like they're doing the right thing, that they're doing it for a greater good, so they feel that they're the hero. And it was the ultimate example of Superman still being, quote, Superman, but his methods and his thinking is just that enough off that even though he feels that he's the hero, he really is the villain. And so kind of the interesting about it, the big twist to it, is eventually, everything comes to a head and he ends up evading America and killing Lex Luthor and all this stuff. And the big twist is he stages his own death because he realizes that he has gone too far, that he really is the villain. So he stages his own death to take himself out of the picture. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But that was, to me, one of the best examples of a Superman gone evil, without even realizing that he was evil the whole time. So like Batman dies. I mean, it's a twisted tale. It's worth a read, but yeah, I thought that was a really good, well done one. But yes, I do like some of the things they're doing. With the new ones, with Omni-Man and of course, Homelander and things like that. But to me, as much as I enjoy Homelander, everything about Homelander, he's not trying to do it for the greater good of anybody else. Homelander is just trying to do it for himself. Yeah. Exactly. So that's the problem with him. He is, the epitome of what we would love all villains to be, that they're so obviously self-centered and self-serving. But then we have, the majority of our politicians are exactly that. Right? So we don't really identify those villains. We put them in office instead. So when it comes to that, not so much. But I do like the twist with Omni-Man, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So who's your favorite?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I think my favorite is probably Omni-Man.
Okay.
Just because I really like it, kind of like part of like what we were talking about last episode. I really like how it feels like a really a really lived in and like realized like version of like what I was talking about with the whole apex predator thing, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like his whole species, like
Is the apex
their
predator.
whole species is the apex, and like they're trying to like I won't spoil anything, but like they're trying to essentially like just keep themselves existent, and by doing that they're like essentially just evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like their whole like the whole species, like the way that they like find worth is through
Conquest.
being superior in
Mm-hmm.
like conquest and
Mm-hmm.
like battle and stuff like that. But it's like through the lens of just about any other species on any other planet, they're just going to see that as destruction
And
and
just
just like
evil.
and just pure evil,
Right.
right? And so I think that it's just a really cool quality of that character, of like that inner struggle that Omni-Man kind of has, of like I'm part of a species that's supposed to feel this way,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't really feel that way.
Because
Why?
now
Right?
I've become human.
Right, yeah,
Yep.
and
And so,
I really like that quality of it.
right.
So that's probably why he's my favorite. But yeah, like you were saying, I mean, like there's things to love about like pretty much any of those like
Mm-hmm.
kind of evil soup iterations, and I really it's a hard choice because yeah, Homelander is a really good example of just like being only in it for yourself as a villain, and just
Right.
like kind of still a personification of that apex predator thing, because it's like he's man-made, but he's
Mm-hmm.
still something
But
that
again, to
has
your point that you were talking about last week, we made our own apex predator.
exactly
Yeah.
like we made him, but now he thinks that he's above
Mm-hmm.
his inventors, right?
Right.
And I just yeah, there's some really cool character qualities. So that was the main reason I just wanted to bring that up, because I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, then my second question today. So the Terrifier 3 teaser trailer
Oh
was
man.
released.
Oh
Um,
man.
and I wanted to get your opinion on this,
So
because especially with Damien Leone's track record of like
right.
how he shows kills in
See.
movies and stuff,
So I.
do you feel like
Oh.
killing kids in horror is like overstepping a line?
So let me qualify it first of all. So I know you enjoy the Terrifier movies and stuff.
Uh.
Not my bag, right? So we got to go there first. So even though I could chuckle at the trailer and everything, the trailer is more than enough for me. It if the intent is to draw people in, it did the opposite. I have no interest in seeing Terrifier 3 just because of that teaser trailer with a kid going, Santa! Next scene, there's blood and guts everywhere. Like, no, that is not a movie for me. That's too far. That said, however, other than the Terrifier movies,
Mm,
if it moves the story, if it actually drives the plot, and it's not just a plot device,
mm,
then I can get behind it. Um, I, I think part of the message that I get, the message I get from the Terrifier movies, is that we're all meat, and it doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your gender, you're just meat. So for me, I'm not and it's funny because I actually years ago wrote a story called Meat Puppet, and that was the whole point of that story, is that we're all just meat, and that as meat, we just do our job, serve our purpose, provide substance to some beast, and
mm,
then whatever doesn't provide substance gets spit out, and that's what the Meat Puppet story was all about.
hmm.
But your boy just took it to a whole new level, and that's the message I get, that we're all meat. So that's just not my bag. So yeah, in this particular example, not my bag, but there probably are examples out there. So if somebody was to dig in, they could probably find something that I liked and the kid died and be like, yeah, I like that movie. Sorry, my bad. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, just not my bag of tea in this case.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I get what you're saying too, because like to me, there's kind of a part of it that feels like that feels like if it's not something that is moving the plot forward in
Mhm.
some way, or like something that is a significant plot point, then it kind of feels like it's something that's there just for shock value,
Right.
right? Like it
Absolutely.
feels like it's something like, even for example, like in the 2018 Halloween reboot, how
Mm.
they started off with Michael killing a kid, and
Mhm.
it was just kind of like, what was really the point of that,
Right.
other than just making us go, oh my god, he killed a
A
kid?
kid.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, that's kind of how I end up feeling about
Mhm.
it, is like, it just feels, it feels like the ultimate um like manipulation of
Mm.
just shock factor.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know. Like, I think like it's hard because like I do like movies that are just like ridiculousness in that sense, where it's
Mhm.
just like, it's just shock value, and it's like what you're saying, that
Mhm.
people are just meat, and it's just like, there's almost like a comedy that you extract because of that.
Right.
But yeah, like in this case, after I saw that trailer, like I just felt so weirdly conflicted, because
Mm.
it was like, I love Damien Leone, I love Terrifier, I love Art the Clown,
Mhm.
but like, like, are we just getting into the area of shock value just to be shock value, and like
Mhm.
nothing is really going to have anything to do with the plot? Because like, at least in Terrifier 2, even though there were like some really brutal kills,
Mhm.
like they were still tied to like the main characters, and they
Mhm.
were still tied to kind of the overarching story that they were telling with art and everything.
Mhm.
But it's like, with this one specifically, it's like, if he's just running around dressed as Santa Claus killing randomly, it's like, are we back to kind of that Terrifier 1 range, where it's like, this is just meat and shock, like,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, so I don't know how to feel about it. I'm kind of in the middle, and it's probably gonna be until I actually see the movie to like know like how to ultimately feel about that. Like,
Right.
did you kind of cross the line of just like, we're just killing a kid and making it brutal just to shock people,
Mhm.
or will it have any kind of deeper meaning to it, like with the one kid that we saw that Art clearly killed in Terrifier 2, having a deeper backstory to
To
them,
go
right?
and yeah, something to develop from.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I guess it's the time of year. It's the right season. But I don't know. Did you ever see Krampus?
No, no, I
So
didn't.
kids die in that. Spoiler if anybody cares to see the movie. Um, but it what it does, there's a message in that. It lets you know, because the natural assumption being that the main protagonist is a kid, and that there are a lot of kids in the story, that
Mm,
they're somehow going to be safe, because typically in horror films kids are kind of symbolizing hope. They're
mm,
always kind of the light, you know.
mm,
So what they did though is, pretty early on some kids get taken out, and
mm.
so the message was, no one's safe. That's not what I'm trying to tell you here.
Kind of like It Chapter 1,
Right,
where it's like,
exactly. Where the
yeah,
kid dies right away at the very beginning, right? You see
yeah,
a kid die. And see, again, that's another example of where it tells you none of these characters are safe per se just because they're a kid.
right,
And on top of that, they're not safe from a brutal death, like It Chapter 1 begins with a brutal death,
mm,
because they're a kid.
yeah,
Right? So that to me is where it's really meaningful, and it's not just for shock value. And yeah, it has shock value, but it builds kind of that tension and that
right,
fear that you're thinking any one of these kids could go out,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so that was the same way with Krampus, and so that was kind of the message there, is that yes, it's shocking, but we want you to understand all bets are off. And
yeah.
so and I thought that was a good point of it and everything. So I'm glad I thought of that, because I'm sure somebody would have pointed out that I made a comment about that I enjoyed the kid deaths and that, and then be like, "What are you talking about?" So all right, so let's go into my first question. So like you said, I finally did watch season 1 of Invincible. I did love it overall, but now I know why I was so hesitant. So
Mm,
for me, Kirkman's Invincible was always about, what if Superman had Peter Parker as a son,
mm,
right? And so, of course, if Superman was bad while his son Peter Parker is still good in the comics, the real missing parallel when you talk about that paradigm was Mary Jane, right? Because a big part of the Spider-Man mythos is Mary Jane and him having this girlfriend that he had to, for the longest time, keep his identity from. And even the movies kind of went full circle on that and had him lose his identity with, their Mary Jane, right? But in the comic, Adam Eve was his main love.
Yeah.
And she knew very quickly who he was and everything like that. So there was no Mary Jane. So, and because she had powers, there was never that identity crisis, never that conflict like that, the Peter Parker conflict on that, because that was a big part of his mythos. So, with the television show, they introduced a new character that's basically the Mary Jane character of it,
right?
Where he's trying to keep his identity secret and everything. He finally reveals, and you got the whole conflict that happens from there and everything. He's like, he reveals, and she's like, "Well, I already knew. You think I'm an idiot?" And it's like, okay, you're right. But without, so first of all, what do you think of that change? Do you like what they did for the show compared to the comics? I know you read the comic. Do you like the change to kind of really flesh out that Peter Parker mythos, or what do you think of it?
I don't know. It's hard because there was one aspect of that like you brought up to me a bit earlier, whereas like that's kind of how they're like kind of inserting like more of like the teen drama element of the show, and it's like I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to say. I think it depends on like where we're ultimately building toward with that character, right? Because like if she's only there basically just to kind of be this drama element and to just kind of be like
sort of a plot device in that aspect.
Yeah, kind of like the plot device of like the human drama of the that Mark would have to deal with. I don't know if I'm going to like her character as much overall if that turns out to just be like all that she really is. But like I don't know if with her character they're building towards like Mark suffering like an extreme loss or something like that. Like kind because like kind of like the stereotype going into Mary Jane and like Gwen Stacy and everything. I feel like the stereotype, if not them being with Spider-Man, it's them dying because of something Spider-Man.
I hope they don't fridge her.
Yeah,
I hope that's not where they're going with it.
Yeah, and I don't know like really what direction they're planning to take. But that because that's the other part of it. That's like if they go that direction, that's one of those things where it's like, all right, it feels like we've already seen this story before with like Mary Jane and Spider-Man kind of getting together, and now it feels like we've already seen this story before of Gwen Stacy dying and Spider-Man having to deal with the fact that like he caused it in some way or whatever. And yeah, that's the thing that kind of like puts me off about it a little bit. I feel like without spoiling anything, I feel like they kind of flesh her character out a little bit more in season 2.
Okay.
To where
that's good to hear.
Yeah, to where it doesn't feel like she's only there for a dramatic element, but there still is kind of the question remaining, and like sure, there's only been 4 episodes of season 2 so far, so that's not much to work off of, but there's still like kind of questions up in the air of like what are they really planning with this character, right? And I hope that those questions don't just kind of get like a blunt and like
sudden
sudden and blunt answer that's like oh well okay I guess the character doesn't matter anymore or whatever, right? Like I hope that doesn't happen. But I don't know, it's Invincible, so
right, and that's the problem with Invincible, and that's the thing, the show, because I thought the comic was brutal enough as it was. It's a pretty brutal comic.
Yeah.
But him holding him up on the train and smashing through people, that didn't happen in the comic.
Oh, man.
That was totally brutal to make the point And it's like, and he's just using him as a human meat shield that just blasts through people
Right.
to
Yeah.
make the point that they're nothing.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that was wow. So again, it's like clearly all bets are off. Yeah, I hope they do something with her and that there's a point to it. I have a feeling that there's a plot in the comic that they don't want to do because it's a very politically charged topic.
Mm,
So I think they're trying to avoid that topic with Adam Eve by having this other character be involved,
mm,
and kind of I think maybe just distract from that storyline and then go a different direction for a little bit because of that. So that's my fear is that couple fears, either that they're just trying to because of the political charge of what happens to Adam Eve, or they're just going to fridge her, and I don't like that at all.
mm,
I really hope that's not the direction to go. And
yeah.
he doesn't need a character to be fridged for him to motivate it.
Yeah.
He knows his purpose now. He
Yeah.
feels his purpose is to protect the Earth from his father's race.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and at least by the end of season 1, from his father, right? So I'm sure in season 2 they might develop further on what happens in the comic. But speaking of season 2, so without spoiling anything, how do you rate season 2 so far?
Ooh, so far, I'd probably give it. I'd say either like an 8 or 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Because there's some elements that it feels like are done just like sublime, like especially like just the fight scenes alone. I
Right.
really like the way that the fight snes are animated in that
You're right.
show.
They do a heck of a good job with those.
Yeah, it's just such a cool way to do it, and one of the main reasons that I kind of like subtract some points is because like they have a lot going on in season 2 so far. Like there's just
Uh,
been so many different factors introduced that are kind of like not like they're kind of all from around the same point in time within the comics, but like it's almost like they're kind of cherry picking like the things that like you know they feel would be the most appealing to like a
mm-hmm.
wider audience or whatever.
Okay.
um and I'm kind of fearful just that they've cherry picked so many different things that like especially by the time that you get to the mid-season finale,
Mm-hmm.
um you'll you'll probably kind of have this feeling too, but at least while I was watching it, I was kind of like, there is so much going on right now,
Because they
like
have to deal
that
with.
they have to deal with. There's no way that they're gonna like handle all of these different plot elements by the end of season 2, because we still only have 4 episodes left
Mm,
of the season. So it's like there's no way that out of all of this stuff they've introduced that all of it is going to get squared away. And it's like, sure, that can be good. Like it can be good to like end a season of a show with
a couple
more,
open-ended.
yeah, with
Yeah.
more open-ended things and questions and stuff, because it just allows for the show to progress.
Mm-hmm.
But like at the same time, there's just so many of those things that like I hope they don't kind of get lost, like you know trying to like almost like having to deal with one plot element and
Mm-hmm.
then just kind of go down it like a list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I hope that they don't end up kind of being like shoehorned into a situation like that
Mm-hmm.
just because of how much is going on. um but yeah, besides that, like the characters, the voice acting, the music, the animation, the fight scenes, it's just all so well done. And it's like it feels like it was definitely worth the wait of like having watched, because this is another one of those shows that I like even on season 1 was actually watching like on release schedule.
Oh, okay.
And it feels like it was definitely well worth the wait of like
Doing that
the
week
ending
to
of
week.
season 1
Okay.
to
Okay.
to
Oh, to come to season 2.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I before I started watching season 1 again, because I'd started before and then stopped, but I started reading the comics again, and I something jumped out at me, which is it's funny that you said that about season 2. a lot happens in the comics.
Yeah.
It is a very busy comic.
Yeah.
It's like it gets going at breakneck speed, and it just keeps going. And in season 1, it was interesting because they took some of the simpler parts of the story, like when Omni-Man took out the quote Justice League team, whatever, the World League or whatever,
The
the
Guardians.
Guardians.
Yeah.
So in the comic, it was like 1 page, like 3 panels.
Yeah.
He just went and just took them out. But in the show, they actually extended it out and they actually fought back and almost seemed like they may have had a chance, right?
Yeah.
And so it was interesting that they extended that out. So I'm wondering if in season 2 they're like, you know what, we don't need to stretch stuff out. We can just focus on, because there's a lot of content to go from, and and it was a pretty long run comic, so it'll be interesting to see. All right, so changing topics. So Deadpool 3. So it's first of all, first question about that one is: are you excited about Deadpool 3 coming this summer?
I'm excited, but I'm tentative,
scared?
man, because like it's just like
cautiously optimistic,
right? Because like I don't know, it just really feels like it's been hit or miss with Marvel lately, like extremely
and they could
hit
even
or
mess
miss.
up an R-rated Deadpool movie.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know, because like I'm assuming, like, do you know what happens at the end of the Marvels? Because it's like
yet.
all over the internet.
So
Okay.
I've been avoiding it. I know.
Okay.
I know that there's some things.
Yeah, no, it's no big deal. We don't have to talk about it. But I feel like they are kind of leading into Deadpool 3 in a little way. And I'm just like a little tentative about what they're gonna do with the casting, and I won't really I won't like spoil any more than that.
I mean, it's probably out there, but you worried about the Radcliffe casting? Is that what you're worried about, or the Daniel Radcliffe?
No, I didn't even know.
Oh, you haven't heard about that?
No.
So apparently Daniel Radcliffe is like all pumped up now and everything, and so Wolverine in the comics is short.
Yeah.
And Daniel's like all pumped up, and everybody's like going, wondering, and asking him. And of course he's denying, but then you got the Spider-Man No Way Home denial thing.
Yeah.
So because one of the things that I guess people are hoping, and it's being hinted at, that they're going to leverage Deadpool 2 Deadpool 3 as sort of a reboot point, right?
Right.
So it's going to be this whole infinite worlds, infinite Earths type thing, and they're going to cherry pick some of the characters from that to survive and go forward in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it may be because we already know Hugh Jackman's coming back as Wolverine, but it's pretty clear that he's only coming back to do it for this movie.
Right.
So they need an explanation for why Hugh Jackman's going to be gone, but then it's an opportunity to introduce who's going to be stepping into the Wolverine role going forward. And so there's been heavy speculation that that's Daniel Radcliffe. So you haven't heard that one.
I mean, like I've heard about the speculation, but I kind of just chalked it up to like a rumor. Like I always, whenever I see like the speculations, I always just assume that like it's just complete bullshit until I like actually hear an announcement. Right? Yeah, like because like I don't know if this announcement actually had any weight to it. Jared and I were talking about it yesterday. But supposedly they announced Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards.
Well, see, I don't know if it was an announcement yet, but it sounds like that Pedro's going to be Reed Richards. I don't know. I really like Pedro, and I like him in Mandalorian, of course, and I like him a lot in Last of Us and everything like that. I actually did like his character in Wonder Woman. That he was probably the only good thing about Wonder Woman. The writing, everything else was awful, but his character and his performance I actually enjoyed up until the very end. But that I think I put that on the writers again. I just don't know, and I guess I just don't know what direction they're going to go. But it's hard. It's really hard because I think it's going to be challenging to cast Reed Richards with someone that can pull it off, because you have to be both sympathetic but cocky at the same time.
Right, yeah.
Right? So he's like, I know I'm the smartest man in the world, and I have to do everything in me to consciously not treat everybody like they're less than me,
Yeah.
right? Because the problem is if you just go with I'm the smartest man in the world, then you just have Lex Luthor,
Mm.
right? But he's
Mhm.
Lex Luthor with compassion.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the whole thing, and so it's real hard. So Pedro might be able to pull it off. I don't know, and my biggest fear is just getting the right writers behind it,
Yeah.
because so far every writer that's tried to bring Fantastic Four to the cinema have totally screwed the pooch
Oh yeah.
every single time. And part of it is because they always try to force fit Doctor Doom and shortcut Doctor Doom into it as a main nemesis and everything. And Doctor Doom can be the main nemesis, but first and foremost, I don't know of any comic of the Fantastic Four where Doctor Doom's origin and their origin were tied.
Mm.
Right? He's
Mhm.
always had a completely separate origin. So, and he's I mean, he's a true big bad. He's
Yeah.
not just a Fantastic Four villain. He's a true big bad.
Yeah.
And it's they always just tie them together. And it's like, yeah, it'd be great if you could do Doctor Doom and do him right. Just don't tie his origin to theirs.
Yeah. I think it's honestly the trap that they kind of fall into with or wait, no, I'm getting them mixed up. It's Kang that's related to Richards, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Uh
Kang is a Richards from the is a Richards from the future.
mm.
So yeah. So and that's I mean that could be still their tie-in too and everything, but that's a struggle. That one I'm a struggle bus on that one. But I guess ultimately, what do you hope happens in it? Back
I
to Deadpool 3. We keep going off track.
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I hope that it's a like a kind of a reboot of sorts, but like my whole thing is like I don't know ultimately what film they're really slating as like the reboot, because like you have Deadpool 3 where there's clearly going to be a bunch of multiversal stuff going on,
Right.
and then you have the Kang Dynasty, and I that's still up in the air. Like
You're
I
right.
honestly don't know
No,
what
what
they're
they're
going
gonna
to
do
do with
there.
that.
Right.
And then you have Secret Wars after that, and it's like that
Could be an
that in
opportunity.
the comics is a whole reset
Right.
event. And so
Exactly.
it's like and it was the same with like the Secret Invasion thing, where it was like you're introducing all of these story threads that in the comics are resets. Like
Right.
all of these storylines are done to reset the
Right. And Secret
universe.
Invasion was a massive event
Yeah.
compared to the low budget series.
Right, yeah. And so it's like it just kind of worries me, because it's like you have all of these reset plot lines, but are you going to actually have one of them be a
A
reset?
reset.
Like is it actually going to happen,
Right.
or
Right.
are we just kind of like playing with names here, right?
Right. Yeah, because I think, yeah, to your point, Secret Invasion was only tied to the comic via the name and the primary race of antagonists,
Right.
but there was no other real parallels between the comic series and what happened in
Exactly.
that series and everything. Yeah, I hope they take advantage of it and introduce some fresh faces again. And and I, to me, I think if they don't go try to knock it out of the park and keep it simple, I think it might even be better.
Mm,
Right? If they don't go too far and then still leverage some of the other stuff, not necessarily the King Dynasty as a reset event, but of course Secret Wars as a reset event, and then you can introduce more and everything. But you can kind of lay the groundwork. I think they'll probably be afraid to do too much in Deadpool 3 because it
mm,
is R rated, so that reduces your audience, and then
yeah.
you are leaving a bunch of people kind of out of the loop.
Right.
So I think if they keep it simple and just introduce a few, then people will be excited about that, and especially introduce a few that are more leaning towards the R-rated type characters. So
Mm,
like Wolverine is a perfect example of that. So you
yeah.
could have your new Wolverine come, and then even potentially Deadpool and Wolverine, and potentially maybe a couple other characters could be the more mature line.
Yeah, like Blade or Ghost
Exactly. Right,
Rider.
and this might be their opportunity to do something like that, like the Marvel Knights, where you had Blade, Ghost Rider, Wolverine, all on a team and stuff like that,
Mm,
and more mature content while still keeping the general audience's content for the other stuff and everything like that. So, and that would be really cool if you had someone like Ghost Rider, or potentially maybe you could get Blade back on track by having him show up in this.
yeah,
I don't know
maybe.
how that ties in, but that it might be interesting, and it's going to tie into Loki for sure because it's going to have the time variance authority in it. So
Mm.
you got that too, which maybe puts Loki heading towards that path of being a more mature storyline and stuff like that. So I think
Yeah.
there's some good things that could potentially happen, but we'll have to see. All right. Well, we're gonna close it up because we're supposed to be doing a shorter one, but anyway. But I'm just gonna close it up at one last note. We will not have any Loki clips because apparently a 36-second clip caused Disney to think that they needed to block our video for last week. So all the reshoots and everything, and then 36 seconds got us banned. So I had to re-edit and repost. So no Loki clips. But thanks again. Dante, as always, I appreciate the conversation. It was pretty exciting. We had a good one. So again, this is Mind the Nerdish Gap, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
Bye bye.
Orders, Commander.
How many times must I tell you? Mind the nerdish gap!